and I was the director for social and environmental affairs. And I had a director general who was from Djibouti, who was my boss. And Interparliamentary Union of IGAD was financed by parliaments, different, the member state parliaments, through already known contributions. And all of them, except Somalia, who was exempted because of its state, had certain amount of contribution. And countries were not paying. So the Director General would go, and it became a challenge. So by our second year, because it was new, we were the first team, we did not have finances. And I was tasked to go around member state parliaments. And I was tasked to go to Kenya, Uganda, and Sudan. And this was a big challenge because the argument of the parliaments was that we do not see how our previous contribution was used. So I committed to them that indeed the accounts are there and would give them in 2 weeks' time breakdown of what was used on salaries, what was used on travel, what was used on per diem, what was used for rent payment, and so on. And Kenya was the first one to release some money. I think it was 350,000 USD. Then the other parliaments, after the 2 weeks, and we gave them their breakdown, released the money. So this was a challenge. It wasn't my responsibility. I wasn't the head of the institution. But I had to step in, one, because my boss was French-speaking, and most of these countries were, except Djibouti, were English-speaking. So actually, when I came to Kenya and Uganda, we went with him, but in Sudan, I went alone. So I succeeded in a situation which was going to actually culminate or was risking the existence of the institution. And I think 2-3 years after our departure, the institution went under. I'm not sure whether it still exists and in what form it exists, IPU IGAD today, but I haven't heard of it again. And I'm sure it's nothing else but funding. So that was a challenge. So by enhancing transparency, by showing these parliaments where the money went, it was possible to unlock and make them contribute as promised.
As a member of the commission, would you foresee a situation or circumstances where an election has to be cancelled, or circumstances where you have to advise the commission to cancel an election? What kind of circumstances would those be that would lead you to advise the commission to cancel an election somewhere?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Well, I think that's a quite a hypothetical situation, but one of the things that can make, first of all, going into elections, if you are definite that the outcome of that election is going to ban the country, it's not worth it, in my opinion. And one of the things that can make that happen is breakdown of the election voting technology, for instance, complete breakdown, just on the eve of the elections. Two, could be complete disruption of the voter register. And I think one of the lessons that we need to learn is to have backup systems in place. For instance, in case of the voter register, there must be a remote recovery site where a parallel vote, what do you call, not a parallel, but a copy voter register is maintained outside of your premises and sometimes outside of your seat of domicile, so that should the worst happen, you have a backup that you can simply pull within seconds. So those are the two scenarios that I would see. And both of them should only be informed by the conviction that our wonderful country is on the verge of collapse if we proceed with these elections.
Finally, Dr. Nuno, do you foresee a day when Kenyans sitting in their homes and wherever would be able to vote on their phone, just like we do M-Pesa, and we send hundreds of thousands of shillings? What about just sending a data, a digit somewhere, clicking and sending, saying that you have voted? Do you foresee such a day? And as a commissioner, if you are to become one, how do you contribute to making such a day happen?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Well, I dream of that day, and I am an optimist. I believe that day will come. The ownership of smartphones, even now as we talk, in the country is so widespread. And I think the only thing we need to do in order to reach there are two things, in my opinion. One, invest heavily in technology. And two, invest in voter education in the use of that technology. And it shouldn't be a month or a year. It has to be a continuous process over a period for people to, and there must be illustration so that even when you're voting, it's not necessarily you vote from wherever there's a TV, so that you actually see step by step how to use your smartphone to vote. And whoever has no TV will go to where there's TV. We are almost reaching a situation where we are approaching 80–90% power connectivity in the country, except for areas that I still consider peripheral and marginal. So the day when our power connectivity will be 100%, and the day when our infrastructure in terms of technology is widespread, we will be able to get there. And being an optimist, I think it's not far-fetched.
Good to end on an optimistic note. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Over to you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Now I'll request Reverend Father Mutie to ask his questions.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Nuno, I would wish to ask you just a few questions.
Okay, sir.
I'll begin by looking at your application, which you did on the 12th of May. You say that you had, as a commissioner of CKRC, you had an opportunity to traverse our great nation and saw for yourself the rich diversity of this nation, both in terms of communities, as well as natural resource distribution and geographical features. You went ahead and said you got the first-hand account of the level of economic and development disparities prevailing in our country. Just to get to hear from you, does this inform your motivation for the application of this job, or do you have any other motivation?
Thank you, Father. I think, yes, that's indeed my statement. IEBC is not a development commission, so it wouldn't address development disparities as I observed. And it's not the motivation as such, but it will be useful to the extent that an electoral process is being designed and the opportunity to vote is being given to everybody, irrespective of where they are and how accessible or inaccessible they are. So I brought that in to reflect that notwithstanding, everyone has a right to vote and everyone is entitled to representation. So for me, that background information would help me, if I was accorded this opportunity, to ensure that designing the electoral process, designing the voter education process, and rolling out processes of engagement with stakeholders is not curtailed and is not devoid of the inclusion of those who are in the periphery and those who are in far-fetched and inaccessible areas. So that was the point at which I included that. But well understanding that IEBC is not a development agency and it cannot correct an imbalances that are responsibilities of development agencies.
So what was your motivation, sir?
My motivation, Father Mutie, was to ensure that I bring clean hands and open mind. I do not see our election processes going well, in my own opinion. And I believe that we require the minds of people who are impartial, who cannot be persuaded and swayed by selfish individual interest, who have no political inclination of one wing or the other, who can then bring in that mindset to the Commission and its dispensation so that we have a better Kenya. I'm a person who believes in leaving a place better than I found it. I find a space where I can make a contribution in IEBC today.
Thank you, sir. Allow me also to interact with your CV. And in your CV, you say that while you were in the Commission, I remind you of CKRC Commission. You said while in the Commission, you've consistently been a strong voice in favor of the marginalized groups. And here you insisted on, being a strong voice for the marginalized, which is also despite devolution. Does it mean that you have an agenda if you become a commission?
Thank you, sir. No, I don't have an agenda, but I'm a person who believes in fairness and equity. That cannot be isolated from me. I was born like that. And I believe everybody, every single person among the 50 million Kenyans has a right to representation and has a right to development. So having been a strong voice was because I felt in the Commission the voice of these categories of people was not coming out clearly. And when many of my colleagues avoided conducting civic education in the areas that were considered difficult and challenging, I took up that task myself. And for 60 days plus, including the month of Ramadan when we were fasting, I conducted civic education from Mandera through Marsabit, all the way Moyale, from Isiolo through Marsabit and all that corner. And I went to collect views from areas that were equally challenging in the rest of Kenya. When I went to Elgeyo Marakwet, what is Elgeyo Marakwet County today, to collect views in a classroom and in a school where people had to be, were expected to come on their own, I ensured that people were actually, those who were unable to come because of distances, were ferried and paid for, through the support of the Commission Secretariat, of course. So I'm one person who's been born like that. I believe in fairness and equity without disenfranchising anybody and without marginalizing anybody. But it has nothing to do with having a mindset that I would favor these people so that they get advantage of others. No, but I believe in them getting the fair share of representation and attention as in other part of the country. And so I believe those in the other parts of the country equally expect fairness and equity from the Commission. So my basic bottom line principle is fairness and equity wherever I serve, and that has been my principle throughout.
Thank you, sir. Allow me to ask you another question. In your interactions and work, do you have a track record of fighting corruption? And if so, share with us an experience or two.
Well, thank you, Father. I wouldn't point out a situation beyond generality of advocating for transparency of records and ensuring that an accountability is on the table. Where, for instance, when I was in the CKRC, as a member of the Finance Committee, we would receive the report of the Secretariat periodically and ensure that the monies received and the monies spent are all accounted for. When I was in IGAD, I was responsible for a directorate, and the directorate had its own resources, and that also, at that level, I ensured that there was an accountable and transparent mechanism. Beyond that, I don't have a situation where I confronted a corrupt practice to the extent that I can attribute myself solely as the person who corrected it.
Thank you. Daktari, suppose you were a commissioner of IEBC and a staffer or a staff brought to you evidence that appears credible, showing that your fellow commissioner or commissioners attempted to influence the award of a tender. What would you do?
Thank you, Father. I think it is important to appreciate the fact that social diversity is everywhere, and where more than one person meets, while one is solely responsible for one's integrity and conduct, you may not be able to persuade the hearts of others to see exactly what they're doing. But should that kind of event arise, one of the first things I would do is to confront the colleague and ask them to hear their part of the story. This is what has been alleged. I will not disclose my source, and it's inappropriate. Our terms of reference and the terms of reference of an independent commissioner does not allow that. And if that fellow declines or denies, or I am not persuaded that I have made an impact sufficient enough to deter, or even if that was accepted, liability accepted, and said, I'm sorry, I did that, but I will not do it again, I would still bring it to the commission without naming names. And we've done that before, I think, at the level of generalities, as I said before, where we caution each other at the commission level and say, it appears or it has been reported that some of us are interfering with the Secretariat process of doing their work by interfering with the tender awards. This is unacceptable, and this is that's going to be a situation for removal of a commissioner, should that continue. So please ensure that you desist from that, and that should never be had again. So for me, the approach would be first the colleague, because it might be misunderstanding. And maybe a suggestion made by this colleague may have been construed to be an interference. But even that, as I said earlier, Father Mutia, perception is more important than reality. If a commissioner is perceived to be influencing, that is what needs to be corrected, even if the intention was not to interfere. So I would try to do that perception level, but if, irrespective of the outcome of that, I would still ensure that this will recur, and it's not, I think, too theoretical. This is a very common thing. It happens sometimes with the board members where I sit, and we just raise at the board level and say, look, some of us, and sometimes you do it collectively, say some of us are interfering with the management in awarding tenders. Let us, this is not our call of duty. You know, get out of that. And if you want to continue doing that, get out of the board. So that happens at the level of collectivity, and I would take that approach personally.
Thank you, Dr. Nunu. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Reverend Father. Dr. Nunu, we've now come to the end of your oral interview. Maybe I can give you an opportunity to ask a question or make a comment.
Thank you, Dr. Chair. Thank you. I think I would just make one comment and maybe one question. The comment is to appreciate the opportunity you've given me. I think I'm leaving this hall a better person than I came in through your interaction, through your interrogations. I appreciate the opportunity. Again, as I said at the beginning, I believe that you've given me an opportunity to be heard. And for me, that is a very fair and fair opportunity, one of the things that I hold in very high esteem. My question is, I know these interviews are going on until the 22nd. When would a candidate expect a final decision from the panel?
Thank you so much, Dr. Nuno. After the interviews, we'll be retreating to come up with our recommendations. We'll then send those to His Excellency, the President, who would then formally gazette the nominees for this position. So at that point is when you'd actually find out the outcome of the interview.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, do allow me, on behalf of my fellow panelists, as well as on behalf of the Kenyan people, to express our sincere appreciation for you applying to serve Kenya in the capacity of member of IEBC. We don't take it for granted, so we really do appreciate, and we wish you well. So a member of the Secretariat will now escort you as you leave, and please ensure you get your original certificates so that you go with them. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, members.
So we will be reconvening at 2 o'clock to meet with the next candidate. Thank you.